When was the last time you did something nice for somebody? Some little tiny part of you kinda wanted them to know it was you? Not in a bad way necessarily, just you held the door open or you paid it forward, paid for somebody's coffee behind you in line, and there was this little tiny flicker of, "I hope they saw that. I hope somebody noticed." Maybe you even posted about it on social media, just a little, "I paid for a stranger's coffee, feeling blessed today, hashtag blessed," kinda post. I'm not judging you for that at all because I have absolutely done it too, more than once. But today's verse, it's about to call that whole instinct out by name. And I'm not going to lie, it kind of made me squirm a little bit when I read it because we've spent this whole series talking about how hard the different things are that Jesus asks of us. Turning the other cheek, not getting even, loving people who have genuinely hurt us. And today, it's a different kind of hard. It's not about how we treat people who wrong us, it's about how we treat people when we are the ones doing something good, whether we're doing it for them or whether we're doing it just for us to be recognized. And I'm not saying that in an ugly way, but Jesus is about to talk about giving to people in need. He is not talking about whether we give or not. He's talking about the why, how we do it, whether we even need anybody watching us do it in the first place. So, Matthew 6, verses 1 through 4, let's get into it. And I want you to be honest with yourself the whole way through this one because I had to be. No lie, I had to be. Hey, y'all, welcome back to Unscripted Conversations. I'm Ashley, and I am so glad you're here today. So, we are still going verse by verse through the Sermon on the Mount, and today we are jumping into Matthew 6. We spent the last few weeks in chapter 5 talking about not getting even and loving the people who've actually hurt us, which, if you missed those, go back because they were a lot. They were deep and they were a lot. Today, Jesus is moving on to talk about giving, prayer, fasting, basically the stuff we actually do to live out our faith in daily life, other than just knowing it in our heads, like knowing what we should do. And today, we're only going to look at the first four verses about giving to people who need it. So grab your tea, coffee, whatever you're drinking, get all comfy, cozy, and let's get into it. But before we jump straight in, we're going to do a quick recap. Last week, we talked about loving your enemies, and I told y'all about somebody in my own life who makes that a whole lot easier said than done. I think you understand completely what I'm saying. But like I said, if you missed it, go back and listen because today's kind of the flip side of that same coin. Last week was about our hearts towards people who wronged us, but today is going to be more about our hearts when we are the ones that are doing something good, whether we are doing it because it's right or because we want a little recognition or a little pat on the back. Mm. So, you know the deal. Let's pray real quick before we get in too deep. God, today is a little different kind of heart check for us. It's not about somebody who hurt us today, it's about us, plain and simple, and why we do the good things that we do. Show us the times that we've wanted a little credit more than we actually wanted to help somebody. Show us where we've done something right for a not so right reason, even when we didn't even realize that we were doing it or that was the why behind it. Help us to actually hear this today instead of just feeling a little guilty for however long this lasts and going right back to how we were living. We love you. We need you right here next to us. We are always trusting you to speak to us directly. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. So remember when we started, I asked y'all about that little flicker you get inside when you do something nice. That little, I hope somebody noticed feeling. Let's actually look at what Jesus says about that because it turns out he's got some very direct thoughts on the whole thing. So, Matthew 6, verse 1, the NLT says, "Watch out, don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven." Wow. Now, the message says, "Steer clear of the limelight and the grandstand plays. All that's just puffed up vanity. Your Father, who sees in secret, will honor you." I really love how they word grandstand plays. Y'all know that was quotations. That is such a good way to put it because honestly, that's exactly what we're talking about. You do something good, but you make sure that when you do it, everybody is watching. Like the coffee I mentioned earlier. I just paid for a stranger's coffee, feeling blessed today. Hashtag blessed. That post, that is a grandstand play. You want to be recognized. You want people to see, oh, look at me. I did this for somebody today. That's not what you're supposed to do. So then in verse 2, the NLT says, "When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get." Okay, so they weren't literally walking around with trumpets, blowing them every time they dropped a coin in somebody's hand. Jesus is just being a little sarcastic right there. He's trying to make it look a bit ridiculous and over the top just to make a point. But we've got our own versions of trumpets now, don't we? Posting the picture of you handing somebody a meal, the swipe up to see how you can help this family's story, or the little humble brag caption. Didn't do this for the likes, but dot dot dot. Girl, if you have to say you didn't do it for the likes, maybe ask yourself why you need to post it in the first place. I will be honest with you. This is not comfortable to talk about because it is very easy to act like I've never once done something kind and then quietly hoped somebody noticed. I have more than once. And I honestly think every one of us has caught ourselves doing this. It's not usually some big dramatic thing, it's a little sneaky, just a tiny little everyday version of it. Think about church for a second because church is basically ground zero for this. You bring a meal to the family who just had a baby. You make sure to mention it in the group chat. Just dropped off dinner for the Johnsons. Please keep them in your prayer, which is fine. Maybe that's kind of to remind people to pray, or maybe it's letting everybody know that you're the one who did it. Sometimes it's both. Figuring out which one it actually is, that takes a bit of honesty within yourself. Or the potluck. You bring the nice dish that takes the effort and you make sure people know you are the one who made it. Not to be a total jerk about it, but because it feels good when somebody says, "Who made this?" And you get to say, "Oh, that was me." There's nothing wrong with a good dish or a compliment, but watch how quickly that little compliment can turn into something that you're constantly chasing instead of something that just happens. Same thing with volunteering. You sign up to help with something, and there's a little part of you that's glad other people are going to see your name on the list. They're going to see you there working hard, being helpful. There's nothing wrong with that either. But the real question Jesus is asking isn't, did anybody see it? It's, why did you do it? And would you have still done it if nobody ever found out about it? That is the actual test. Would you still give the same amount if nobody ever knew it was you? Would you still help that family if you couldn't post about it? Or if you couldn't mention it in the group chat, or couldn't get that little moment of somebody telling you, "Oh, that was so sweet. How kind of you." Some things, if we're being honest, we might do a whole lot less if we knew for a fact nobody would ever find out. And that's not really the reason why Jesus wants us to give in the first place. He wants your heart to be the kind of person that gives, even when nobody's looking. Just like do the right thing, even when nobody's looking. Matthew verse 3 and 4 NLT. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. I love that line. It's basically Jesus saying, do it so quietly that you almost forget that you did it yourself. Not tell one close friend so at least somebody knows how good of a person you are. Not post it anonymously, but still post it because technically nobody knows it was me. Actually do it privately. Just you and God are the only ones that know about it. And this isn't just a New Testament thing either. It shows up way earlier. Job actually defends himself with this exact standard way back in Job 31. He's listing out how he's lived right. And he says in the NLT, have I refused to help the poor or crush the hopes of widows? Have I been stingy with my food and refused to share it with orphans? And then, no, from childhood, I have cared for orphans like a father, and all my life I have cared for widows. He's not saying that to brag. He's saying it because he's actually lived it quietly for years, way before anybody was ever questioning him about it or knew about it altogether. Proverbs has a bunch of these too. Proverbs 19:17. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Proverbs 22:9. The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. And then you have Proverbs 14:31. Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God. Not one of those verses says anything about telling people about it. No. And then everybody clapped. It's just, this is what it looks like to actually live right. Quiet, over and over, whether anybody's keeping a score or not. And I want to add just one more layer to this because I don't want anybody walking away from today thinking giving is supposed to feel like a chore, something you are just trying to get through because you're supposed to. That's not the heart behind any of this. You should really want to give, not because you have to, not out of guilt, but because inside you, deep inside you, you want to help somebody. You want to make their life a little bit easier. And there's a story that shows this so well. Jesus is sitting next to the offering box in the temple and he's watching people put their money in. This is in Mark 12 verses 41 through 44. Rich people are walking up, putting these large amounts in. And then a poor widow comes up and drops in two small coins. That is basically nothing, worth a few cents at the most. And Jesus calls his disciples over and says, NLT, I tell you the truth. This poor widow has given more than all the others who are making contributions, for they gave a tiny part of their surplus. But she, poor as she is, has given everything she had to live on. Think about that for a second. The rich folks gave more money way more money actually if you're just counting dollars. But percentage wise, what they gave didn't cost them a thing. It was extra, just a leftover after they paid everything and still have plenty left over. She gave everything. Her whole living is how it says. And Jesus says that is worth more, even though on paper it is basically nothing. Pocket change. She basically gave pennies where the rich gave hundreds of dollars. That's what I mean when I say don't give because you feel like you have to. And don't measure it by the number either. It's not about how much is the amount, it's about how much of you is actually in it. Somebody can write out a big check and it basically costs them nothing. And somebody else can hand over something small that actually costs them everything. And that's the one Jesus is pointing to. All right. So now that we know about all this, how do we live it out this week or in the future? Not in the temple, not 2,000 years ago, just regular everyday life. I think one of the easiest ways to check yourself on this is to ask before you do something kind, who is this actually for? And I'm not meaning that in a guilt trip kind of way. I'm being honest. If you are about to help somebody drop off a meal, cover somebody's meal, pay it forward, whatever it is, and there's already a little part of your brain planning how you're going to tell people about it, that's worth noticing. Not necessarily worth stopping over, just worth paying attention to. Because the thing I've realized about myself is sometimes I catch that thought after I've already decided to do the kind thing. Like giving was going to happen regardless. And then came the, ooh, I could post this. Those thoughts show up a little bit separately, almost like an afterthought trying to attach itself onto something that was already good, and I'm getting ready to ruin it. And I think that's a lot different than doing something specifically because you want the credit. One is a real gift with little temptation to boast about it, and the other one is basically using somebody's need as your own personal photo op for attention. Does that make sense? I really think that's worth being honest with ourselves about because it's not always black and white. Sometimes you post about it and it's generally to encourage other people to help as well or to remind people to pray for a family. That's not wrong. I don't think Jesus is saying you're never allowed to let anybody know that you did something kind ever under any circumstance. I think he is more asking us to check why we did it. Would you have still done it the exact same way if you knew for a fact nobody was ever going to see it or know that it was you? Now let's talk about money specifically for a second, since that's really what this whole passage is really about. I think a lot of us have this thing where we wait to give until we feel like we have extra. Like once the bills are paid and there's some breathing room or little wiggle room, then we'll be generous. There is nothing wrong with being wise with our money. I'm not telling you to give away your grocery budget, but that widow didn't wait until she had extra. She gave out of what she really had, and it was basically nothing. But Jesus called that the bigger gift. I try to think about that a lot with my own life, honestly. There have been times when money was tight, real tight, and giving anything at all felt like not really silly, but it felt like I really needed to get bread and milk versus giving somebody $20. And what difference is that $20 really going to make? I don't think it's ever really been about the difference it's going to make for the person receiving it. I think it's about what it does in you. Choosing to give something when it actually cost you something instead of only giving what was already extra and it wouldn't have been missed anyways. And that ties right back into the whole don't let your left hand know what your right is doing. Because if you're only given out of your leftovers, it's really easy to do that quietly. Nobody notices 20 extra dollars from somebody who's got plenty. But when that giving actually costs you something, that's usually where the temptation stems to tell somebody about it gets a little stronger because you kind of want somebody to know what it cost you. And that's the moment Jesus is talking about. Give it anyway and let it stay between you and God. I think this whole passage honestly comes down to one question. Are you doing good things because you really love people and you love God? Or are you doing things because you love how it feels when people respond to what you did? Those can look identical from the outside. Nobody that is watching can tell the difference, but you know, and God knows. And honestly, God knowing is always who this was actually for, anyways. It's not about you giving the sandwich to the person, which is an amazing thing. It's more about God seeing what you're doing and the reasons behind what you're doing. You're on your way to work. You packed a sandwich because you only are going to have 20 minutes for a lunch break. So you made sure to pack your sandwich because that's the only time that you're going to have a break throughout the day. And that's the only thing that you're going to have to eat all day long. But when you're going to work, you get to a stoplight or a stop sign, and there's somebody sitting there saying homeless or food or something like that. You give them your sandwich. You don't tell anybody. You don't boast about it online just for how many likes and hearts and comments. Oh my gosh, how great. That is so good of you. No, that's not the reason. The reasoning is to show God that you have learned what He is teaching. You have learned the Bible. You know how to live your life because everything you do it for God. You work for the Lord. You give for the Lord because everything that we've received comes straight from God. The work that you're doing, no matter if it's washing toilets, you're doing that for God. And we need to realize that is what should be behind every decision we ever make. All right, y'all. So here's where we ended up today doing good, giving to people who need it. That's not really the hardest part for most of us. The hard part is doing it without needing anybody to see it, without the trumpets, without the social media post, without the little humble brag tucked into a caption. And it's not about the size of the gift either. That widow gave next to nothing by the numbers, the total amount. And Jesus called it the biggest gift in the room because it actually cost her something. It wasn't a leftover, it was real. So, really, this whole thing comes down to one question. Are you doing good because you love people and you love God? or because you love how it feels when people think you're a good person. Nobody watching can tell the difference from the outside, but you can, and so can God. God, show us the places where we've been doing good things for the wrong reasons, even when we didn't realize that's what was happening. Help us to actually want to give, not out of guilt, not because we feel like we have to, but because it's inside of us and we want to from our heart. Help us to give quietly this week. Help us not to need anybody to know but you. And for the times we've already got that a little mixed up, thank you for your grace. Thank you for not holding it against us, and help us to do better, Father, going forward. We love you. We need you right next to us, and we are trusting you to work in us and through us. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. All right, y'all, that's a wrap on Matthew 6, 1 through 4, given without needing anybody to see it. Come back next week because we're moving into verses 5 through 18. We're talking about prayer and fasting, which honestly, it hits a lot of the same nerves, but from a different angle. We'll just see how it goes. But first, here's your challenge for this week. Do one thing that is just for God to see. Not your spouse, not your best friend, not the group chat, not on Instagram, just you and God. It can be giving somebody money, it can be just saying a kind word to somebody, or helping somebody out without even telling anybody that you did it. Whatever it is, don't tell a soul. Let it just be between y'all. And hey, if you enjoy this podcast, I really appreciate it if you can consider sharing it out to those who you might think that need it, or just anybody in general. Or you can buy me a coffee over at ko-fi.com/Simply Blessed Designs. It helps keep the show going, and I appreciate every single one of you. Thanks for listening today, and I will see you next week on Unscripted Conversations. Thanks, y'all.